Croesus wanted to invade Persia, but he did not know that it was the right decision. He wasn't sure that it was the right decision. Um, and I think he was right in thinking so, because in the end, his decision to invade Persia led into, or brought the attention of Cyrus the Great to Lydia, and then to the neighbors of Lydia, in particular the Greek city-states. And then we had this Greco-Persia war that went on for many years, for decades. So because he was not sure that it was the right decision, he thought it was good to first consult the gods. And this was a common practice in the ancient world, especially around in Europe, Africa, North Africa to be specific, and Middle East, Iran today, and Iraq, and all those countries around there. And this is another thing that is so African. I had mentioned in the previous video that it was interesting that the Greek had these practices that were so African, even though Lydia is not, Lydians were not Greeks per se, even though part of the empire was inhabited by Greeks. They also practiced kind of the same, they had all kind of the same practices, and one of these is consulting the gods through the oracles, which were like mostly women who were seen as the mouthpieces of God. And so that's what Croesus had to do. Here in Africa, very recent in fact, if you talk about tribes like the Kalenjin, they had what we call the Orgoyot, the Maasais had what we call the Olaibon. These were people who were thought to be mouthpieces of the gods, and before the tribe goes into war, they had to go to talk to these people and find out if the gods favored them going into war. And another thing that another practice that was so African related to this is that some of the ways they went and tried to find out if the gods agreed them to go to war is killing an animal and looking into their internal organs, trying to read signs. And this happened even here in Africa. Some tribes still do it. They kill an animal, a goat, and then they look at the intestines, try to read some signs. So that made me, reading this book and coming across such practices made me wonder, like, how does it happen that some practices that are very primitive, you can call them primitive, were in Europe, and they are still in Africa, or they were in Africa. That made me think maybe humans have intermingled a lot more than we think in the past. So come back to Croesus and invading Persia. So, but why before we look at how Croesus went about asking the gods, which is also a very interesting part of the story that Herodotus tells, we want to know why Croesus thought or wanted to invade Persia. And Herodotus gives two reasons. One of the reasons is that Croesus kind of wanted the land, especially the land that was formerly part of the Assyrian Empire. It was a fertile land, and he thought they could use that land for themselves. So that was one of the reasons. But the other reason, and which is like the more primary reason, is that Croesus was the brother-in-law to a certain king called Astyages, who was the king of the Medes. And by this time, the Medes had been conquered by the Persians. Before that, it was the Medes who had conquered the Persian tribes and made them part of their empire. But Cyrus the Great, who turns out to be a grandson of Astyages, which is another story I'll create a video for later on, was a Mede. The mom was, he was a Persian. The mother was the daughter of Astyages. When he grew up, he came and conquered his his grandfather and took over and became the lord of the Medes. So when that happened, Croesus was not happy because Astyages was married to his sister, Arienis. And it is interesting that the marriage between Astyages and Arienis was a product of another war. Earlier, the Medes, when the Medes were the lords of the region, including the lords of the Persians, the Medes had a war going on between them and the Lydians, especially when the Lydians were under Croesus' father Aliatis. So this war went on, and one day they were at a battlefield and there was a solar eclipse, and that was very scary for both camps. And because of, they saw it as a sign from the gods that they should stop fighting, and they agreed to a truce, which was overseen by the king of Egypt and Babylon. In Egypt, I think it was Amasis II who was still in power. They oversaw that treaty, and part of the treaty, in order to cement their newfound friendship, the Medes and the Lydians agreed to a marriage between their son and daughter. So the the daughter of Aliatis, who is the sister of Croesus, Alienis, got married to Astyages, and they became like family. So when Astyages was toppled out of power, Croesus was not happy about that because that was his brother-in-law. So that's the primary reason why he wanted to invade Persia. So let's go back to him trying to find out whether it was a good idea to invade Persia. So Croesus sent out messengers to the oracles, not one, several. He wanted first to test these oracles and find one that he would be relied on, one that would give accurate information. So he gave them a test. So he sent out messengers to different oracles within the empire and outside. And the messengers were to ask the oracles one simple question. What do you think is the Lydian king doing right now? So the Lydian king, meanwhile, Croesus, decided to do something that was very unlikely for anybody to do, so that when the oracles will not just guess and then they are right. So while the messengers were out inquiring from the oracles, he killed a lamb, a sheep, and a tortoise and boiled them in a big bronze pot. So he kept boiling these two animals together. And he was expecting to hear from the oracle that will tell the messengers that that's what he was doing, will be the one he will ask whether he should go to war with Persia. So I think two oracles got it right. I don't know how they did that. Maybe they had prior information or somebody leaked the information. We don't know. But he got the message back. One of those was, they are called one of the Greek oracles. I'm forgetting the exact name they call. It's a popular temple. I'm forgetting the name for a moment. So he got these messages back, and then when he was sure that two of them got it right, he sent the messengers back now to ask them, should I go into war with Persia? And both of them kind of gave replies that were like, yeah, it's okay, go to war with Persia. It was not straightforward answers, of course. Oracles or people like prophets sometimes will give you this info that can be interpreted in so many ways. But anyway, he interpreted the messages he received as saying he can go to war with Persia. He sent again the messages to ask what strategy he should use, and he was told he should try to talk to allies or find allies. And he went and talked, or he sent messages to the king of Egypt, Amasis, and he agreed to be an ally. He talked to the Babylonians, who agreed to join his alliance. He talked to Greek citizens, in particular Spartans and the Athenians. And at this point in the book, Herodotus goes into a tangent. when he's talking about Croesus seeking for alliance from the Greeks, he now takes that moment to explain to us the tribes of the Greeks, the many different tribes and their origin, their history, their political organization. He goes into a lot of detail about that. So now, to cut the story short, because that's a big chunk of information he shares about the Greeks, their origin and whatever. So after, let's say, all the people he approached, all the empires he approached, they kind of accepted to be allies. So they were ready to go, come join his army and then go face the Persians. But before this, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Spartans and the Athenians could join his army, Croesus went alone and attacked the land that used to be Assyria, but now was under the Persians. He attacked and terrorized the people who were living there. And of course, Cyrus the Great was not happy. It was Cyrus the Great who he was kind of attacking by taking over these parts of the world. Later on, I will create a video to explain how Herodotus explains how Cyrus the Great became the king of the Persians. So it's a very interesting story as well. So when he did that, Cyrus the Great put together his army and came, faced him. At some point, it was kind of stalemate. But winter was coming, and it was a tradition during that time that when winter comes, the warring parties will break and go back home, and then they'll come back after winter. So they broke up, and Croesus went back home. What he did not realize is that Cyrus the Great was not going back home. He followed him back to Sardis, the capital of Lydia, but Croesus was not aware. So it was a surprise attack. And they came, and during this time, Croesus was now being like, we are taking this time, this winter, we will organize, talk to our allies and see how to plan ourselves for the big war that is coming. But the war came to him before the time and before he had planned, and they captured Sardis. Cyrus the Great captured Sardis. And he had given orders to his soldiers that they shouldn't kill Croesus. He wanted him alive. They captured him alive, and later on, Croesus attempted to kill him, and that's a story I'll tell you in the next video.